There was this king who wanted to go see his people. And he went around the country, and he went to each city, each town. He wanted to get to know the people, from the inside. And he also visited a prison. He wants to know everybody. And the prison, he asked each person that he met in the prison, "What are you in for?" So Yankel says, "You know why I'm in? They thought I was Shmerel, and they arrested me. It's really a mistaken identity." They asked Beryl, "What are you in for?" Beryl was explaining to them how they thought this and they thought that, and they looked at this and looked at that, and really it was this. Then the king asked Laser, "What are you in for?" Every other person had an excuse, wasn't their fault. Laser said, "Well, actually, I was poor, and I was hungry, so I stole. The king's like, "Take Laser out of prison immediately." He says, "Why? Why Laser? Laser's the one who admitted he was guilty. Why Laser?" He says, "This guy is a Russia. He's going to mess up all the tzaddikim here. Laser, who is guilty, is going to mess everyone else up." So, in the month of Elul, it's a month of making a stock taking, a month of understanding who we are and where we are. It's not a month where we're supposed to try to beautify the things that aren't beautiful and pretend that they're not there. On the other hand, although we're not supposed to, ignore who we really are and what we're really doing. On the other hand, when we talk about making a stock taking, people make a mistake about doing this. They right away, some people when they're making a spiritual stock taking, they right away take out a pen and a paper and they start looking at the Shema that they're saying or they're not saying, and they're doing mincha, they're not doing mincha, they're eating kosher, not eating kosher. They're right away going to the pen and paper, but the first thing is not the pen and paper. The first thing we need to start in order to make a calculation of where we are is to know our value, to know how precious we are. If you don't know how precious you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's a first step in doing any calculation of where you need to be. That is, you have to know who you are and what you're about. Then you need to know what you need. Then you can understand what you need to do. There's a halacha in the Talmud. Let's say I have a fruit tree, I have an apple tree, and I want to sell the fruit of the tree, but the tree hasn't grown any fruit yet. So halacha is, if I try to sell you that, and I make a transaction, you give me $100, and for the fruit of the tree, the halacha is the fruit is not sold. Why? You cannot acquire something that does not yet exist. You can't sell the fruit if there's no fruit there. However, the Talmud says, if you sell the tree for its fruits, not selling the whole tree, just the ability of the tree to produce fruit, then you not only you acquire the tree, you also acquire the fruit. In other words, you can't just focus on the fruit. You focus just on the details, you don't get anything. Even though the whole point of the tree is to make fruit. But in order to be able to start anything, you have to start with the source. So too, when we talk about the month of Elul, the month of Hashem gives us to renew ourselves, become different, or not just different, become closer to who we really are inside, which is what the word teshuvah means. Teshuvah means to come closer to yourself. Teshuvah means to come back. Come back to what? Come back to who you are. In order to do teshuvah, you have to know what your value is. And we're going to see today, from the perspective of this week's Torah portion, unbelievable insight of how we're supposed to look at each other and look at ourselves. There's a halacha in this week's Torah portion about a murder. If a body is discovered, and no one knows who killed this person, Torah says that the elders of Yerushalayim, the head of the Sanhedrin, should come to the body, and they should measure the distance from the body to the closest town, closest city, and then they go to the town that's closest, and they take a calf near a river in that town, and they slaughter this calf, and they say, "Our hands did not spill this blood, and our eyes did not see this person, and we don't." That's what that's what Torah says. The obvious question is, what's the point of doing that? Killing the calf and going to and measuring the body and measuring the distance from the body to the city. There's a whole discussion in the Talmud about how do you measure? Do you measure from his stomach? Do you measure from his nose? Where do you measure from? The three opinions. Why bring the greatest rabbis from Jerusalem, from the head of the court, to come down to this city? And not only that, if it's obvious, it's right outside this city where this person has died, they still have to measure. So still go down on the ground, they're going to get dirty, and they still have to measure where's the closest place to this body. What's the point? So there is explanation of Rabbi Saadia Gaon. Rabbi Saadia Gaon says, First of all, why are they saying our hands didn't spill the blood? The head of the Sanhedrin, the head of the Jewish court, we're thinking that he's the murderer? Of course he's not the murderer. Rather, the Talmud says, when someone comes to a city, you have to make sure the person has food. Make sure the person has a place to stay. And not only that, you have to set him on his journey and help him get to where they need to go. So if there's a city, and there's no protection of the city, and people are walking in the city unprotected, and they're leaving the city unprotected, so that's why this person got killed. So the head of the Sanhedrin is announcing, we didn't let the guy go without protection. And the Rabbi Moshe says a very sharp statement. He says, just like we are responsible for the things we do, we're responsible for the things that we don't do. And therefore the head of the Sanhedrin has to announce, it wasn't our fault. We know, and if there is a city which next to the city this person passed away, that's why they have to atone for it, because probably they are guilty and that their city didn't do a sufficient amount for this person who has passed away. That's why they're the ones. The Ibn Ezra says something else. Ibn Ezra says that if there is a sin done in a certain area, probably the people in that area are responsible for it. So therefore, the closest people to that murder, it's just like the Talmud says, something may have to happen, but a murder may have to happen, someone may have to die, but the one who actually kills a person, even if it's by accident, is because they're guilty. They are inside themselves, even though it wasn't their fault, but deep down subconsciously there's something negative there, and that's why this person's death happened to this person. Similarly, the Ibn Ezra says, if this person died, why die here next to the city? There must be something negative in the city, and that's why we ascribe responsibility to people of that city. But they don't answer the question, why measure? You could see where the body is. You could see how close the body is to the next city. Why measure? So Maimonides, the Rambam, in Guide to Perplexed, the Rambam says, the purpose of measuring is in order to publicize the murder. In order that people should know that this person passed away. And if hopefully the world will get out, this guy got killed. And then we'll discover who the murderer is. In order to discover who the murderer is, therefore we put the word out. And how do we put the word out? By everyone getting down and dirty, and the head of this, the Jewish court comes, and everyone will hear. And that's what Rambam says. But there are many ways to publicize, even though they didn't have WhatsApp and didn't have Facebook in those days. But there are many different ways we could publicize it. What's the meaning of this specific way of the heads of the Jewish court coming, and what does that mean? So the Rebbe explains like this. Rebbe explains like this. If there's a Jew, I'll never forget this. I was once walking down the hall in elementary school, I don't know how old I was, and there was a lady sitting on the floor, and I didn't know what to do, so I just walked over her. I don't know how great I was then. I was very young. I didn't know what to do. I just walked. The Torah is telling us, you see someone on the ground, everything stops. Someone, the Jew, is on the ground, doesn't matter what the story is, everything stops. One Jew is on the ground, one Jew is suffering, everything stops. To teach us the value of one Jew. Don't say, oh, there's just one guy. One Jew is on the ground, everything stops. The head of the Jewish court, the court stops, they leave, they come there, they get down and dirty on the ground, and they say, what's going on over here? How did this happen? It's in order to teach us the value of each Jew. And that's why when Yosef HaTzadik, when he sent a message to his father that he was alive, the Torah says he sent wagons. In Hebrew, the word for a wagon, agalah, is the same as the root of the word for a calf, which is this halacha. You take a calf and you slaughter the calf. Why did Yosef send his father a message about the calf with the wagons? He wanted to allude to this halacha. So the simple reason is, he wanted to tell his father, I remember the last thing you taught me. The last thing Yaakov taught Yosef was the law of the calf, the slaughtered calf, the law of the person who was killed and no one knows who killed him. Wow. Why did Yaakov teach it to him? Agala, the wagon is the same root as the word calf. So Yosef sent wagons to allude to the last. I remember the last thing you taught me that. You remember, I'm still religious, I'm still learning the Torah. I remember the last thing you taught me. Why did Yaakov teach him this law? Because when Yaakov sent Yosef to go to his brothers, Yaakov accompanied him. And Yosef said, why are you accompanying me? I could just walk by myself. So Yaakov told Yosef, I want to tell you why I'm accompanying you. Because there's a law in the Torah. And when someone leaves a town, you have to not just send them away with food, you also have to send them away with someone to guide them and to start their journey with them. That's one explanation. But the Zohar says that Yaakov did not accompany Yosef. In fact, Yaakov felt regret about the fact that he didn't walk with Yosef. So why did he teach him the laws of Eglah Rufa? Why teach him this specific law about the murder when no one knows who killed him? Why teach him this law? This is because although Yaakov didn't know consciously what was going to happen, but subconsciously with prophecy, Yaakov knew that Yosef was in deep trouble. Yaakov knew something was going to happen to him. In his prophecy, in something beyond his logic, beyond his mind, there was something that he had a sense of it. And therefore, Yaakov gave Yosef the energy, ammunition he would need to overcome all the challenges he would have later, with the enmity of his brothers and the grandeur of being the second in command of the Paro and the seduction of Potiphar's wife, and all the different challenges that Yosef would ever encounter. How is Yosef going to handle this? Yaakov sent with Yosef the message of the Eglah Rufa. He sent him the story. He sent him the halacha of the calf. How does that help Yosef? Yosef understands one Jew is important. I may be by myself, and all my brothers hated me, and no, he threw me into a pit. Yosef knows that although he's one Jew by himself, the Torah teaches us how precious each of us is, and he specifically sent wagons. There's another place in Torah that talks about wagons. Who knows another place Torah talks about wagons?
Right.
The Torah talks about wagons.
With the senses, with the spices.
Senses, spices. Oh, yes. The Torah talks about the wagon when it talks about carrying the tabernacle. Carrying all of the things in the tabernacle, the Mishkan, were carried by wagons. Why did God want us to walk around the desert for 40 years? The purpose is that the actual movement of the tabernacle with the wagons was to bring God's holiness everywhere they traveled. So Yaakov was telling Yosef, you are an ambassador of Hashem to Egypt. You're going far away from me, physically, spiritually, but you should know you're not going by yourself. You're not going because no one cares about you. Wherever you go, you're an ambassador of Hashem to reveal Hashem's light and love and truth. That's what Yaakov was telling Yosef by sending him away with this halacha of the Eglah Ruf. There was a Jew.
Let me ask you a question.
Soon, question soon.
There were any witnesses for what he said to him? Nobody ever talked between them like in four eyes? Huh? Never? Like in four eyes. Who heard that? מי שמע את זה?
אותו בני אדם ששמעו את כל התורה. לא בני אדם, הקדוש ברוך הוא, כן? Okay. So, that's how Yaakov empowered Yosef. Listen, we're going to get to you soon. We're getting to you now. Let's get to you right now. The meaning of the Eglah Rufa, this whole story, is very relevant to each of us. Especially with beginning the month of Elul. Oh, thank you.
No, I want to make sure that you're not running away from your paper because...
There's a Jew named Rabbi Moshe Prager. Moshe Prager is a writer who wrote a lot of history of the Holocaust. We know because of Rabbi Moshe Prager. He wrote the following story that he documented. Even though he wasn't there, how did they know? But he found out the story. He documented the story. He said that there were a group of girls who were in Auschwitz, and they were graduates of the Beit Yaakov high school, a very religious high school. Mm-hmm. And they were given the job by the Nazis to be seamstresses. Mm-hmm. And they were given material, and they had to work non-stop. And of course, it was the subhuman conditions, and how could they survive? But they survived. One day, one girl was so weak, in the middle she has this material, and she falls asleep, and the machine is wrapping up the whole material. And the Nazi was watching them. She notices this, and she takes this girl, she throws her on the ground, and she steps on her and hurts her and steps on her until she's bleeding. And all other girls got up and said, no, keep on working. Okay. So they carried her back to the bunk after the work was done. And this girl is totally not going to make it. But she's so weak, and she's gasping, she smells soup. Mm-hmm. They would give them soup in Auschwitz. Soup, we call it a soup. And this girl is asking, she wants soup. So they're thinking, soup for them is life. Mm-hmm. You know, that's all they ate, a tiny bit every day. This is how they survive. This girl can't live the next day anyways. What's the point of giving her soup if she can't live the next day anyway? You could see blood is spilling out of her. She's not going to survive. So one girl, Rachel, she gets up and she says, if we were in high school and one of us would need something, all of us would work together to help that person. None of us would leave any of us alone. If the Nazis succeed in us not helping each other, that means they won. And she inspired them all to take their soup and to share with them. She didn't make it the next day. This girl didn't make it the next day. But Rachel said, we saved ourselves. Our souls were saved. So that's the meaning of the story, the halacha, of the Egla Arufa. The Torah wants to tell us the value of every single Jew. And that's the meaning that this has for each of us as we're approaching the month of Elul. What does the Torah say? The guy leaves the city and he leaves without food and he leaves without accompaniment. What's the meaning of accompaniment? The halacha is, when someone comes to your house, you have to give them food, fine. Besides giving them food, you have to walk out with them. The Talmud says...
Like when they're leaving?
When they're leaving.
Okay.
You have to walk them out a little bit. What's the meaning of walking out with them? What's walking out with them? If they just eat in your house and then they leave, they feel like they're a tzedakah case. They feel that they're your mitzvah. That you have to do kindness. Okay, so they happen to be the victim of your kindness. You know, you had to do kindness to somebody, so they were your mitzvah. But when you walk out with them, you're telling them, you matter to me. You're important to me. The elders, it's unbelievable. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, I know Yosef remembers, he's a good memory, no one else remembers. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, what the Talmud Yerushalmi says? The Talmud Yerushalmi says, when they say, the elders of the city say, we didn't leave the guy without food and without accompaniment, you know what the Talmud Yerushalmi says? Unbelievable. They're not talking about the simple meaning is, we're talking about the guy who got killed. If we would have given him food, he would have been able to have the strength to fight against the murderer. If we would have accompanied him, he would have felt special in himself. He would have felt, has had some confidence, and he would have maybe been able to protect himself against the murderer. The Talmud Yerushalmi says we're not talking about the murdered guy, we're talking about the murderer. Why is there a guy who's a murderer? Where does it come from? A murderer among our people. Where does it come from? You hear it every time. So they're saying we didn't leave the murderer without food. We didn't have to leave the murderer without a company. The reason why this guy became a murderer, why does a person chassidus go so far off? Where does it come from? The Torah says you find a halal. What's a halal mean? Halal means a corpse, but also means a void. Thank you. The reason why a person looks and feels empty is because they find the corpse, they find the void in the field. What does it mean find the void in the field? It means the field means the mundane. We don't realize, but we get caught up with, and we get obsessed with mundane physical things, and we think that's going to satisfy the void in our hearts. That's going to make us feel, value. But then we get disillusioned. That doesn't satisfy anything. So you see a lot of young people growing up, and they're looking to their parents, to their friends, to their teachers, to their schools for some warmth, some love, some connection. And the Torah says, you know why a person grows up, they become empty, there's a void, there's no food, there's no accompaniment. What's food mean? Food means to give them Torah. You see, a child's growing up in Los Angeles, it shouldn't be that this kid is growing up and no one's offering Torah. We have to open a door. The kid's growing up, has to be, but even if you give him Torah, Torah isn't enough. Torah, you have to also give him an accompaniment, make him feel he's connected, you have to feel he's part of it. You find there's someone there's a void. Where's the void coming from? He didn't have food, he didn't have this connection. Levite means a connection, feel a connection to his people. And the Torah is telling us ourselves something. Not just what we have to tell, not just we have to realize the people in our lives who are looking for love and they're in the wrong places, and then they develop this void. Our own selves. What happens if you yourself find yourself a void? You find a lot of people tell me recently the same phenomena. I'm learning Torah, I'm showing up to shul, it feels so empty. Halal means I feel a void. I'm doing all this stuff, I'm showing up, I'm keeping kosher, I'm keeping shabbat, but I don't feel anything. So you want to know, mihiko, how did this happen? Where did the murder come from in myself? How did I get killed? How did I lose all the energy in myself? Where did it come from? What should I do? So Torah says, what should you do? You should take a calf and kill the calf from the back of the neck. Usually the halacha is that all the sacrifices in the Torah are offered in the temple. And who offers the sacrifices? The Kohen. A Kohen in the temple is one who offers the sacrifice. What do you do if you feel you're empty inside? You feel the mitzvahs you do have no value. What should you do? The face of the person represents his inner enjoyment, his pleasure, his interest, his understanding. The back means the things in our lives which we don't understand, we don't appreciate, we have no connection to. So Torah says, you're not in a place you see holiness. You're not in a place that you're around holy people. You're not around the Kohanim. You're not in the Beit HaMikdash. You don't even feel any interest in what you're doing. But nevertheless, Torah says, hold on to the back of the neck. What does that mean, hold on to the back of the neck? Be stubborn. The Jewish people are called Am Kshei Orah, they're called stubborn people. And why is it that I have to wait 6 hours after meat before milk? I'll wait 4. Why is it I have to do mincha right now? I'll do mincha yesterday. I'll do mincha tomorrow. Why is it I have to do Rabbeinu Tam? No one else does Rabbeinu Tam. Torah says you have to hold on. Am Kshei Orah, if we're stubborn-necked people, and by being stubborn and holding on to the Torah, even though we don't understand, what does the Torah say? You have to cleanse the innocent blood from your midst. There's innocent blood in ourselves. We don't know how it happened. We don't know how we got so obsessed and got so empty where does the emptiness come from? It comes from the fact that we don't value ourselves and our neshama. We don't have self-esteem. Self-esteem means to value your neshama, to value who you are, and therefore every moment you have is precious. So what's the advice the Torah says? Hold on. Last week, I was flying back from Florida, and it was a big plane. Bigger planes are easier to daven in, right? I didn't daven in the morning, for whatever reason, and I need to daven in the plane. So I asked them, the steward, if I could daven in a certain place. I told you the story. So the steward said, you could daven in front of the bathroom. Okay, fine, it was okay. And it's a great place actually to daven. It was the best place I ever had in a plane to daven. It was like perfect. Wow, great.
מה זה daven?
להתפלל. Pray shacharit.
okay.
So I'm praying shacharit. It's great, perfect. It's like a shul almost. Anyways, again, I'm middle of shacharit. I'm middle of the part you can't interrupt. Middle of Shmona Esrei. Middle of lachash. And middle of lachash, then the seatbelt sign comes on. Seatbelt sign comes on, and the guy says, "Sir." I don't respond to him because I'm middle of Shmona Esrei. He says, "Sir, excuse me, sir," and I don't respond. He says, "Sir," he has pulling my sleeve. "Sir," and he's not responding, so he puts his hand on my phone. "Sir," and it's getting a little louder. And I'm not even sure if there's the right thing to do or not. I mean, there's turbulence, there's this. They haven't supposed to sit down. Is it the right? And I decided I am davening right now. That's what I'm doing. He takes away my phone. First, he covered my phone.
Oh, he took your phone.
They took the phone away. He's like, "Sir," and then he was like standing next to me, like breathing down my neck. But I finished davening. Yes, I finished davening, and then I said to him, "I'm sorry, it was a part I couldn't interrupt. Okay, but you need to sit down." I sat down. The point is, sometimes you don't know why you have to continue. But you have to be stiff-necked. You have to be stubborn.
Did you?
I met this guy.
They made the halacha, the plane and the train, just sit in your chair and that's my daven. For that reason. More concentration.
Yesterday,
It's hard to stand.
this guy told me the following story. True story about himself. It's a true story, and you think, but it's so true. It's a true story of each of us. The guy is in his office. This Chabad boy passes by. He says, "Hey, you want to put on tefillin?" He thinks, "Not really, but okay, why not?" Puts on tefillin. Boy comes to him a week or two later, puts on tefillin with him. Okay, why not? Then he says to himself after the boy leaves, he doesn't know why he says it to himself, but he does what he says to himself. This is everyone's story. He says, "Why do I put on tefillin with him? I put on tefillin by myself." And he gets a pair of tefillin and starts putting on tefillin every day.
Wow.
Then he says to himself, "Why should I just say Shema? I could do Shemona Esrei, I could do the whole thing. I could do the lachash, the 18 blessings." Then he says to himself, "Why just Shema and lachash? I could do the whole davening." Then he says to himself, "I'm doing the whole davening. I could do it in a minyan." And he goes to a shul. And then he says to himself, "Why I could just do the minyan once a day? I could do the minyan 3 times a day." And then he says, "Why am I not keeping Shabbat? And why not keeping kosher?" And he became fully religious because, why not? Why not? I need to do this. Why not? This why not, this stubbornness of a Jew to connect to Hashem, even though there's no reason why, you have no interest in doing it, that's how you fill the halal. That's how you fill the emptiness. We have to be very aware of the wonderful, beautiful people in our lives who are searching and they're lonely and they look for love in all the wrong places because they don't find it by us. They don't find it by the Jewish people. They don't find it in the schools. They don't find it from their teachers. They don't find it from the rabbis. And therefore they look elsewhere. They're amazing people. There's an emptiness. So we have to look in ourselves and realize how what we could do to help other people and ourselves. We feel emptiness, to hold on, and then Hashem will help us discover the source, where it comes from. Where's the source it comes from? By not realizing how precious you are and how valuable your mitzvah is. It says in the Torah, someone walks at night. A person is walking by himself at night, and he's if someone's walking by himself at night, he's walking by himself at night. What's the big deal? He's walking at night. He's walking at night. He's doing nothing. And so the Torah says he's liable for his life. What's the big deal? He's walking at night. Big deal, and he's not doing anything specific. The Torah is telling us like this. The Torah is telling us how a lot of young people, they grow up, and their parents don't realize, they're home from school in the break, like they're not doing anything. They're not doing anything, or in general, they're nothing about Judaism that interests them. But they're on break, or in general, they're during school time, but they're not interested in what they're doing. They don't have any ambition. They don't have any taste. They don't have any interest, any attraction to the torah mitzvahs that they're doing. You might think it's not a big deal, but you should know, where does it come from, this halal? Where does it come from, this emptiness that makes us look for all other places? It's because we don't feel this halal. We let ourselves just be, it's empty, it doesn't matter. To realize if we're precious, if each of us are sent by Hashem to this world to bring Mashiach, bring light and goodness to the world, we can't let there be emptiness in life, emptiness in our children. I'm not saying you have to wake up your kids to daven during the break. Let them sleep in a little bit. I'm saying this.
Summer school.
I'm talking about giving. I'm talking about giving yourself and giving your children something that will satisfy their inner soul with a sense of ambition and depth. And it's so important. Don't say, sense of purpose, that's the word.
Yes.
Don't wait till why they're in Greenwich Village now? Where does Greenwich Village come from? It comes because they didn't find anything else where they were. And a lot of them, very sensitive people, they're the ones who are looking farther, because they're the ones who need it more. L'chaim. Chazak Baruch. It was great. We should find out who we are and what we are, and we should come home to Yerushalayim with Mashiach now. L'chaim.